Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillah, we have given you the idea of shaping, positive shaping, in terms of how the Japanese people develop a shaping process called 5S, Seri, Seton, Seso, Seketsu, Shuke, how they develop this whole idea of progressively developing cleanliness. So it becomes a national culture, and as you go to Japan, every child is being taught this whole idea of keeping themselves clean, keeping their environmental clean, keeping their home clean, their factory clean, and so on. So that is showing the power of shaping and conditioning for positive use. But also you know that shaping and conditioning can be used for negative effects. So for example, there is this whole idea of Islamophobia. That is actually a shaping process, a shaping perception to make it people afraid of Islam. That's why they call it Islamophobia. And how they go about with it, there are groups of people who are interested to ensure that Islam does not progress in this 21st century, or Islam is being destroyed. There are people, and this is not something new. From the day that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created this earth, our father Prophet Adam alayhi salam was tempted by shaitan, and then he lost the paradise, and he goes down into this world. Our Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam faced all kind of problem when he was preaching this truth to the pagan Meccans. And even after he was victorious and he managed to spread the message to Mecca, our Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam faces two great powers of his time, that is the Persian Empire and the Byzantium Empire, and they are not happy, and they want to gobble up this little teeny weeny little Islamic kind of idea, which is contrary to their, for example, the Persian, they're fire worshippers and so on. So they are not happy with that situation. So you have people who are not happy with Islam today. So you have all kind of forces. They are the puppet master behind this pulling of strings. So you find a lot of these puppet masters with their own agenda. For example, the extreme right, politicians who wants to preserve their position, they use Islam as a punching bag. For example, in Europe now, the far-right politicians is very interested in demonizing Islam because they want to have power. All right. So there are many forces. Okay, that's why in the local culture we have this wayang kulit. They call it the puppet show. So you can only see the puppet, but behind the screen, behind the light, you can see the puppet master. So there are people, groups of people, ideological people who wants to destroy Islam. But this is Dinul Haq, this is the truth. So this truth, whether they plan or they plot to do anything evil, inshallah, with the grace of Allah, Islam will be there until Yawmul Akhir. That is a promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we should not feel down, even though we have to face the reality of Islamophobia. And how they go about with it? They shape perception. They shape perception. How they shape perception? Subtle ideas, which they are putting into the minds of majority of people, non-Muslims. And these are the tricks that they use so that through their mass media, through the newspapers, television, through the internet, through all kind of media, they are actually the puppet master trying to work towards the destruction of Islam. So we as Muslims, adherent of this ultimate truth, we have to have sabar, fortitude, because we have to face this in our time. Rasulullah faced his challenges during his time. So throughout the history of humanity, there's always challenges. And a lot of the issues that they are bringing are false, all right? But we have to bring up our community. The Muslims must be aware of these puppet masters and make sure that we are living in peace and harmony with all human beings and all creatures on this earth. So how do they go about with it? Shaping. So that's why I'm telling you this whole idea of shaping. First is, for example, in the West, they say Islam is not compatible with modern civilization. Oh, these people, they are old, they are going back to the 7th century, the age of the camel, and they play this game. All right. Unfortunately, there are some people who are in that mode. Some Muslims practicing, but they are in the villages. For example, the villages of Afghanistan was never exposed to anything, and so they are having their purda women and so on, which is not Islamic. These are Sasanian and actually Brahmin culture, but that became part of the culture of Afghanistan, and they portray all Muslims, women like that. Whereas you don't see that in Malaysia, you don't see that in Indonesia, you don't see it in many compatible, progressive Muslim countries. All right, so they are small numbers, but they make it universal. So the way they portray Islam is not compatible with modern civilization. What do you mean by modern civilization? If modern civilization means taking alcohol, having drugs, having hedonistic lifestyle, or a free for all, that is not even Western civilization. This is the hedonistic culture only in the last 50 years. Even if you take the traditional Christian culture, say in the 1950s, they are very compatible with Islam. So that's why we have to be able to explain to them. They say, oh, Muslims are odd people. Just because we use a scarf, we are odd people. But what about the nuns? What about people who use scarves? All right, so because of that, that becomes an issue. All right, so that is just one small part of the culture which is within the framework of Islam. So if, you classify that as odd, then you have to find a better way of explaining to them. Oh, they say Muslims are terrorists. We are terrorists. We are bombing here, bombing there. There are terrorists in every type of people. There are atheist terrorists, there are religious terrorists, there are right-wing terrorists, left-wing terrorists. All right? If you look at the war, the whole war, for example, like if you look at the communist system, Marxism and its offshoot, all right? Communist system, Stalin, Marx, Mao Zedong, Pol Pot, and they killed more than 100 million people, all right, for their ideological warfare. Or if you have the secular warfare, First War, Second World War, more than 200 million people died in those wars. They are not religious wars. Or look at the Holocaust, all right? Nazi Germany, Hitler. So what is important is for us to see that there are many people with many strengths. Even, for example, they say Muslims are terrorists. The number of people being killed by these so-called, we don't call them Muslim terrorists, we call them idiots, or some whatever brand that they have, that terrorists. They are not Muslims, all right? But if they go bombing innocent people, they are definitely not Muslims, because Islam doesn't allow that. But you look at the number of people being killed. For example, if you say Muslims are terrorists, what about the more than 100,000 Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar being slaughtered by Buddhist monks? Go around, going to the village, killing people, burning them to death. This is happening in the Arakan state of Myanmar. But why don't you call the Buddhist terrorists? Or in America, they have the Ku Klux Klan. They have more than 4 million members in the early 1950s. All right? Now they have dissipated into so many right-wing groups which they attack their rival, the churches, or they attack the abortion clinics and so on, and they kill people. All right? And there are many people of that nature. So the blame is not on Islam. The blame is on some crazy people, whether they are Muslims, whether they are Buddhists, whether they are Hindus, whether they are atheists. All right, especially communism, Marxism, they are the worst killers on this earth. If you look, never in the history of mankind has that kind of hundreds of millions of people being murdered and killed in the name of an ideology. All right, so we can respond to that. All right, oh, the Muslims worship the moon because on the mosque you have the moon and the crescent. This is an idea by extreme, for example, evangelical Christian. You can't find that in the Quran. There's nowhere in the Quran the God of Allah, the God of Islam, is the God of Moses, the God of Jesus, the God of Abraham, the God of our Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We are Abrahamic in our faith. Our one God, Kul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Say your Lord God is the one God, the eternal, absolute. He does not beget nor is begotten, and there's none like unto him. So there is nothing. The symbol, the crescent, is only a Saljuk symbol, maybe 500-600 years after the demise of Prophet Muhammad. It's just a symbolic thing, but nothing to do that we worship the moon. All right? So these are being used. Or we are out to conquer the West. So now you have refugees from Syria, from Muslim world and Africa, Mali, and so on, going to Europe. We are out to conquer the West. Well, these are circumstantial situations. All right? These are the poor people, refugees, trying to find a better life. It could be Muslims, it could be non-Muslims, it could be anybody. Yeah? They oppress women. There are many others like, oh, they cut your hand, and so, etc. So these are the shaping process that is taking place throughout the whole idea to demonize Islam, so that, one, to make sure that the non-Muslims, because Islam constitutes 1.7 billion people of the world. We are about 20% of the population of the world. So they are afraid that Islam will be 30, 40, 50% because Islam is the fastest growing religion. All right? So what is important is for us to understand that we can develop a response to all these things, be patient, have a positive outlook, always bring the best of Islam. What is it? We are the custodian of Allah, we are His Khalifa on this earth, always striving to make ourselves good, to help others to be good and make the world good. And this is the truth. So when we bring that, then we can bring all people from all culture, all value systems to respect one another, to love one another, and make this world a beautiful world of peace, of tranquility, of happiness, of justice for all goodly creatures on this earth, inshallah.